All right. What is up, Big 12 fans and any college football fans watching this because you're interested in the current state of NIL and Nick Saban's comments? This is Joseph back with the Big 12 Football Digest. And today we are talking about some statements that Nick Saban made regarding NIL. NIL has probably been, NIL and just overall the ability to pay players has been the number one topic of college football for quite a while now, right? Ever since it became a rampant thing in college football, it has been a topic of conversation, a lot of curiosity, a lot of gray area. I'm excited to talk about these comments. What we're going to do today, we'll go over Nick Saban's comments, see what his thoughts are. And then at the end, I'll give you guys my final thoughts on whether or not I agree with Nick Saban's comments, but also what a suggestion from me might be that could stabilize NIL and, make it a better long-term path. So stick around, guys. Also, comment down below your thoughts as we go through the video here. Definitely want to hear what you guys are thinking. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are interested in Big 12 or any college football content. Hit the notification bell so you always know when we drop a new video. And on that note, let's go ahead and dive in and take a look at these comments by Nick Saban. Okay, guys. So on the screen here, we've got an article from 24/7 Sports, and you can see here college football legend and former Alabama coach Nick Saban is an outspoken as outspoken as any major figure in the sport game, and made another call for broad sweeping change hours before the national championship game. The national championship game's tonight. Hopefully, that's a good one. As an extra little fun question, make sure you guys comment down below who's winning the national championship. And if you're watching this after the national championship, let me know what you thought. This time pushing for NIL reform, his passion for tackling college football's most pertinent issues led numerous coaches across the country to suggest that Saban should assume a new potential role as commissioner, and the NIL changes he posed Monday fall under the umbrella of moves he could make in that job. Ahead of the new revenue sharing era that projects to begin following the House versus NCAA settlement, questions linger about the disparity between the biggest programs and those with fewer resources. Bridging the gap, Saban said, is imperative. And just to give a little context, guys, the House versus NCAA settlement, that's basically the idea that schools would be able to rev share with players, pay players directly through the school, and there would be a cap of $20.5 million, I believe, that schools will be able to pay players. So just letting you know a little bit of context there, and let's continue on. So this is the quote by Saban. The people out there need to know the model is unsustainable, Saban said on the Pat McAfee show Monday. It's not good for players. I mean, people in Congress, I don't care who has to get off their butt and do something. Players need to get compensated, no doubt, but it has to be done in some kind of way, have competitive balance, that every school has the same thing. One school can't spend $30 million for players while another school is spending $3 million. Now, I'm going to keep going here. And I think at the surface level, we understand how that is true, where if one school is spending 30, they will have a huge advantage over schools spending 3. It goes way deeper than that. And we're going to continue on here, but there's more to go over. But we all understand that, but it goes way deeper than that. And there needs to be context added there. NIL deals get more lucrative with each passing year, and multiple quarterbacks this offseason netted massive paydays through the transfer portal. Miami newcomer Carson Beck, for example, reportedly secured $10 million in NIL earnings over the last year and agreed to a $4 million deal to join the Hurricanes. Meanwhile, new Duke quarterback Darian Mensah landed the largest known NIL deal in college football history with a 2-year, $8 million agreement. Not every school has the capability to spend top dollar for elite talent, though. While Ohio State carries a purported $20 million roster into Monday night's national championship game against Notre Dame, teams outside of the Big Ten and SEC, and certainly outside of the Power Four, by and large, have much smaller NIL budgets. How the House settlement impacts that disparity remains to be seen. Direct payments from university to student athletes are a step away from the current model that requires NIL collectives to operate separately from their respective institutions, and revenue sharing could create another wedge between the so-called haves and have-nots, given the massive differences between conferences' income. A commissioner should should that position exist in the years to come, may be tasked with leveling the playing field and placing clearly stated guidelines and rules on the transfer portal, NIL, scheduling, and other pertinent factors. Saban's outwardness and his status as the most accomplished coach in the sport's history makes him an obvious candidate to fill the job and tackle college football's biggest issues head on. Okay, guys, so that was the article. Those were the statements by Coach Saban. Definitely crazy stuff. Stick around. I'm going to give you guys some of my thoughts on how we could implement some structure into NIL, some different ideas, and just kind of give you my final thoughts on the situation. Okay, guys, like I said, I'm about to give you my final thoughts on the situation. Before I do so, please comment down below. What are you guys thinking about NIL right now? What is the solution? What are your ideas? And after I share my thoughts, maybe you could tell me how you feel about my opinion and my ideas. I'd love to hear it. Be constructive. Don't be a douche, but, is what it is. If you're too rude, I'll just block you. Um, also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell so you always know when we drop new content. We're putting out tons of Big 12 content, tons of college football content. So if you are not subscribed, it's going to be tough for you to keep up with all of it. Also, like the video if you want to. You definitely do not have to. It doesn't seem to help too much with the algorithm, but it does let me know if you like it. So, all right. So my thoughts on NIL, I think Saban makes a really great point that there's some schools spending 20, 30 million, and there's other schools spending 3 million, but even more than the schools spending 3 million, there's schools out there that probably aren't spending close to 3 million. I mean, you look at the rosters of some of these teams, there's no way that NIL wise that roster costs, I mean, more than a million. I mean, I don't know what the range is. I am not that much of an insider. I'm not an insider at all, but I'm not that much in the weeds where I would know what, like, what's a good example? I think a good team to throw out there would be like Old Dominion, right? I don't know what that roster costs, or a James Madison, or a Wyoming. Maybe Wyoming's a slightly bigger name, but you guys get what I'm saying, right? These are not P4 teams, and they're not, you know, they're not going to be paying players a ton. I mean, you have to imagine the difference in roster spend between them and like an Ohio State is 20, 30x, right? If not more, at least when we're talking about booster collective money, I feel confident saying that. I also think this idea of the rev sharing with the 20.5 million is a really good step in the right direction. And the reason I say that is it gives a number where schools have a cap. Now, there's other issues with Title IX and all that. I'm not sure how the House settlement's really going to work out. So I won't get into the weeds there, but I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on how this would work. So I think I made a video a couple of years ago when the NIL situation was really buzzing. I mean, not that it's ever not been buzzing, but there was a moment where it really was buzzing. And so I made a video a long time ago. And I talked about salary caps. And I think salary caps is what makes the NFL so even. And I think what you would see, like, let's imagine 20.5 was the rev share number. Let's imagine that collectives had a salary cap for how much they could donate to players or, boosters. It was 20, let's say it was 20 million. Now, what would happen realistically is the schools I mentioned earlier, the G5 schools, will get nowhere near 20 million. Let's be honest. Like, some G5 schools might put the money in, like a SMU, and they get to the P4, or like I don't know, UNLV is not the greatest example, but I could see UNLV getting some boosters, getting a collective, and putting together a 20 million roster and figuring something out. But let's imagine the cap is 20 million. The good thing about that is that means Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, they all know that the other guys are all at a cap of 20 million, right? and it gives you a framework. I think as a person that follows this, I would imagine the collectives and boosters are a little exhausted and a little confused. I think those are fair statements because you're literally just like, there's not a lot of info because it's kind of a gray area topic to even discuss, right? Like no one talks about, like, there's it's starting to become more transparent how much these guys make, but for a long time it has been very gray area. And getting those numbers out on the table, and then it's like, hey guys, this is how close we are to our 20 million. If you guys want us to compete, this is where we're going to need to be. And I think that'd be really good for people to know, and I think it'd be really good for the fan bases to know how much your team is actually able to get to compete against these teams. And I think what happened is, if you wanted to be a serious football school, you'd have to, I think almost all the big names you're hearing right now would figure out a way to meet whatever the salary cap is, right? And I think it would help them get there if there was an actual number they would be striving to attain, right? I think that would help. I also think that you could do the other model where it's, hey, if you want to be a P4 team, if you can do, it's like, hey, there's the P4 salary cap and the G5 or G6 salary cap. And what I'm talking about here, again, these are all abstract ideas, but it's like, hey, the P4, which already has a clear advantage. If you guys aren't thinking that there's some sort of phantom salary cap there, you're out of your mind. I mean, like, let's imagine we say, okay, yeah, G5, the salary cap is 5 million. If you want to spend more than 5 million, anywhere between 5 and 20, you go play in those conferences, but you have to spend 5 million through your collective. And you cannot spend more than 20, and now you're competing with the big dogs. So one, that gives a lot of teams a direct avenue to play in P4. And maybe it's not 5 million, maybe it's 10 million, whatever that number is. You guys get where I'm going with this. And if you're spending under that, then you're competing with the other teams spending under that, right? And it would make a lot more continuity between conferences. Again, I'm not saying this idea is perfect. I'm workshopping this a little, but I think that's where my mind goes. And then I think what you can do is take this salary cap situation, and now that we've expanded the CFP, I think you could expand the CFP even a little more. You can argue if that's a good thing or a bad thing, and give the vast majority of spots to the P4, right? Because it's like, hey, these are heavier rosters, these are stacked squads, they get more spots. It is what it is. That's how it's going to be. And if you want to be in the contention to get more spots, then you better bring your checkbook to the table and build a stacked roster, because that's how the NFL works, guys. It's, hey, you better be willing to compete with the salary cap. If you're not going to be a competitive team. I know, I'm sure a lot of people out there are going to disagree with a lot of this. But I'd love to know your opinions, guys. Comment down below. What are you thinking? I mean, just for example, imagine the salary cap for G4 or for G5 and G6 was 5 million. The salary cap for P4 is 20 million. But if you are in the G5 ranks, let's imagine there was 24 spots, or if we kept it at 12, right? We keep it at 12, and there are 4 G5 spots, just as an example, and there's 8 P4 spots, right? And that's only, I don't know exactly how I'd work that out, just an idea, but and it would be like, yes, and on top of that, you would be disqualified from having a home field advantage if you got into the CFP, and your first 2 rounds of the CFP are going to go against teams that have home field advantages, right? Because this would be a clear haves and have-nots. But let's be honest, guys, there's already a haves and have-nots. And if anything, there's becoming the haves, the kind of haves, the kind of have-nots, and the clear have-nots, right? And when I say that, what I'm talking about is you got the elite teams in the Big Ten and the SEC that just pour out money like it's nobody's business. You got a couple of those in the ACC too. And then you got the Big 12 and ACC really that are kind of like the kind of haves. On average, you're not going to see quite the high-end quality of what you see in the SEC and Big Ten. I don't know. I'm rambling a little here. Comment down below, guys. What are your thoughts on the NIL situation? Do you like the idea of one salary cap for every team? Do you like the idea of one salary cap for each conference, and that could be agreed on, ... Do you like the idea of P4, G5 salary caps, or do you have another idea that you want to throw out? I'd love to know how you guys are thinking. Again, please don't be too critical of my ideas. I was workshopping some of these as I spoke to you about them. I'm going to get out of here, guys. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and go Big 12.